He said it like he was reading from a lease agreement. Not loud, not angry, just steady, the way men speak when they've already decided something and they're only telling you out of courtesy. Mom, I think it's time we talked about the house. I was standing at the kitchen counter. I had just poured my second cup of coffee. The morning light was coming through the window above the sink the way it always did in October, that low pale gold that made everything look softer than it was. I remember thinking the light was pretty. I remember thinking that, and then I heard what my son actually said, and the light didn't change, but something else did. He said he and his wife needed the house transferred into their names, that it made more sense, that I was getting older and it was easier this way. He used the word practical 3 times. He did not use the word please once. I didn't say anything. I set my coffee cup down on the counter. I looked at my son, my boy, the one I had driven to soccer practice and waited for in hospital hallways when he had his appendix out at 14 and cried over when he graduated college, and I thought, I don't know who taught you to stand in my kitchen and speak to me like this. But I didn't say that either. I just said, let me think about it. And he nodded, like that was the right answer. My name is not important. What I am is 63 years old, a retired school librarian from outside Columbus, Ohio, and the owner of a 3-bedroom ranch house on Clover Mill Road that I have lived in for 27 years. My husband, Robert, and I bought it together in 1998. We painted every room ourselves. He built the back deck with his own hands over 2 summers. He died 11 years ago, quietly, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and I have kept the house ever since, because it is the only place I have ever felt completely like myself. My son's name is Aaron. He is 36 years old. He works in logistics and makes decent money, not exceptional money, but enough. He married a woman named Fiona 4 years ago. I will say this about Fiona. She is organized, she is determined, and she has never once looked at me like I was a person whose opinion mattered. They had been living in an apartment in Cincinnati. Then Fiona lost her job. Then there were some bills, they said. Some things had piled up, and would I mind if they stayed with me for a little while, just until they got back on their feet? I said, of course. I said, you are my son, of course. That was 14 months before Aaron stood in my kitchen and told me he needed the house. The first few weeks were fine, or fine enough. Fiona rearranged my pantry and I didn't say anything. She bought a new shower curtain for the hall bathroom without asking, and I thanked her for it. She started referring to the guest room as our room, and I let it go because it was their room. They were sleeping in it. What else would she call it? But there is a way a person can move through a house that tells you whether they think they belong there or whether they think they own it. Fiona moved like she owned it. Not rude exactly. Not loud, just certain. She would redirect the mail carrier when a package came. She would mention to neighbors that they were in the process of making some changes. She unplugged the small lamp in the living room that Robert and I had bought at an estate sale in 2003, a blue ceramic base, nothing fancy, and when I asked where it was, she said it didn't really go with the space. I found it in a box in the garage. I brought it back inside and I put it back on the end table, and I didn't say anything about it. Aaron saw me do it. He watched me plug it in. He didn't say a word. I should have understood then what was happening. I think some part of me did. But when it is your child, when it is the person you raised and fed and worried over and loved with the kind of love that doesn't ask anything back, it takes longer to let yourself see it clearly. It took me longer than I am proud of. The debts came out gradually, the way bad news always does, a little at a time, like water finding the low point in a floor. First it was credit card debt. Fiona's from before they were married. She'd had a business that didn't work out. she said, some kind of online retail operation, and she still owed on that. Then there were medical bills, a procedure she'd needed 2 years ago, apparently expensive even with insurance. Then there was a personal loan she'd taken out to consolidate the other things, and that loan had its own interest and its own payment, and the payments had gotten behind. By the time I understood the full picture, Fiona owed somewhere close to $180,000. I want to be clear, I am not a wealthy woman. I have my retirement savings, my teacher's pension, Robert's life insurance, and this house. I live simply. I do not want for anything, but there is no family fortune here. There is no cushion deep enough to absorb $180,000 and keep walking. I said as much to Aaron one evening when Fiona was out. I said I was sorry they were in a hard spot, and I wanted to help in whatever way I could, but I had to be honest with him about what I had and what I didn't have. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "That's why the house makes sense, Mom. If you transferred it to us, we could refinance it and pay everything off." I said, "Aaron, this is my house." He said, "I know, but you don't need all of it. You only use 2 rooms. I only used 2 rooms. Like the rest of it was already theirs, and I was just a guest taking up space." I told him I needed to think. He said okay. He went back to watching television. I sat in Robert's chair by the back window, and I looked out at the deck, and I thought about what my husband would say if he were here. I knew exactly what he would say. Robert was a gentle man, but he was not soft. He had a way of being completely clear without raising his voice. He would have said something quiet and final, and it would have been over. But Robert wasn't here, and I was, and I had to figure out what I was going to do. 3 weeks after that conversation, the tone changed. Fiona came home one evening with a folder, an actual manila folder with papers inside. She set it on the dinner table while I was clearing dishes, and she said, "I had a friend look at some options." The friend was apparently a real estate attorney. The papers were a proposed deed transfer and a draft of what she called a life estate arrangement, which sounds generous until you read what it means. Under a life estate, I would be allowed to live in the house until I died, but the property would legally belong to Aaron and Fiona immediately. I would have no authority to sell it, borrow against it, or make any significant decisions about it. I would simply be permitted to exist in it until I didn't anymore. She explained this to me in a pleasant, measured voice, like a woman who has practiced the explanation in a mirror. I picked up the papers. I read through them slowly. I put them back down. I said, "I'll look these over." Fiona said, "We were hoping you could sign this week. The refinance window is time sensitive." I said, "I'll look them over." She pressed her lips together. She picked up the folder and left the room. That night I called my friend Miriam, who I have known since we were both young teachers at the same middle school. Miriam's sister is a probate attorney in Dayton. By the end of the week, I had a meeting scheduled. I did not tell Aaron. I did not tell Fiona. I went on a Thursday afternoon while they were both at work, and I sat across from a woman who listened to everything I said and then told me what I needed to know. What I needed to know was this: I still had time, but probably not much. If I signed anything, deed transfer, life estate, any of it, I would be giving up rights that are extremely difficult to recover. If they refinanced the house and then couldn't make the payments, the bank would foreclose. My credit would be destroyed, and because I had voluntarily transferred the property, there would be little a court could do to help me. The attorney also told me something I hadn't fully considered. She said that if Aaron and Fiona were to declare bankruptcy, which was a real possibility given Fiona's debt load, and I had transferred the house to them within the previous few years, that transfer could be scrutinized. It could be considered a fraudulent conveyance if I'd done it to protect the asset, or it could pull the house into the bankruptcy estate if I hadn't. Either way, I could lose my home without ever having meant to. I sat very still in that office, and I thought about the blue lamp in the garage. I thought about Fiona's folder on my dinner table. I thought about Aaron saying I only use 2 rooms. I asked the attorney what she recommended. She recommended I change my will immediately, establish a revocable living trust with myself as the trustee, and consult with a financial advisor about how to protect my retirement accounts. She gave me a list of next steps. She said it calmly, without drama, the way people say things when they want you to be able to actually hear them. I drove home. I made dinner. I behaved exactly as I always had. I had about 90 days of work ahead of me, and I needed to do all of it quietly. This is the part people don't talk about much, the quiet months. The months when you are going about your ordinary life, cooking, doing laundry, watching the evening news, and the whole time underneath, you are building something. Not revenge, not a trap, just a wall. A legal, documented, completely solid wall between yourself and the thing that is coming for you. I met with an estate planning attorney. I updated my will, established the living trust, and transferred the house into it, naming myself as trustee and my niece, Delphine, my late sister's daughter, a steady woman who lives in Indianapolis, as the successor trustee. I met with my financial advisor and restructured my retirement accounts to ensure they had proper beneficiary designations that bypassed probate entirely. I also did something the attorneys hadn't suggested, but that felt right to me. I started keeping a record. Not dramatic. Just a simple notebook, dates and details, the conversation about the house, the folder on the dinner table, the lamp in the garage, small things written down in plain language. I kept the notebook in my car. Throughout all of this, Aaron and Fiona continued to push. Fiona asked twice more about the deed transfer. Aaron brought up the subject at dinner one Sunday and used the phrase, "before it's too late," which I understood to mean before I became too old to be pressured into it. He also mentioned, almost casually, that they had spoken to a different attorney who had said the life estate arrangement was very common for situations like this. I said, "That's interesting." He said, "Mom, we just want to get this settled." I said, "I understand," and I cleared the dishes and went to bed. The moment everything shifted happened on a Wednesday evening in February. Fiona had spent the afternoon on the phone, and I could tell from the way she moved through the house afterward, too quickly, too quietly, that something had happened. At dinner she barely spoke. Aaron kept glancing at her and then at me. After dinner, he asked me to sit down. He said the creditors had escalated. One of the lenders had referred Fiona's account to a collections attorney. There was talk of a lawsuit. They needed a decision. He said it plainly without the careful language he usually used, and what came through wasn't pressure. It was panic. He said, "Mom, we need you to sign the house over. We're out of options." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I thought about all the years I had watched him figure things out. He had never been the kind of child who asked for help easily. He had always wanted to handle things himself, to be capable, to be the one who had it together. And now he was sitting across from me, looking like a man who had run out of road. I felt sorry for him. I want to say that plainly, because it's true. I felt sorry for him, but I also knew what I knew. I said, "Aaron, I love you. I have loved you your whole life, and I will love you for the rest of mine. But I am not going to sign this house over to you." He stared at me. I said, "This house is in a trust. It has been in a trust for 2 months. Even if I wanted to transfer it, I couldn't do it quickly, and I don't want to. This is my home. It is the home your father and I built together, and I will not give it away." Fiona stood up from the table. Her face had gone very still. Aaron said, "You did that without telling us?" I said, "I'm telling you now." The silence in that room was the longest silence I have sat through since the morning the hospital called about Robert, different in every other way, but that quality of time stopping, I recognized it. Then Fiona said quietly, "So what exactly are we supposed to do?" I said, "I think you need to speak with bankruptcy attorney. There are options I'm not qualified to advise you on, but they don't involve my house." They left 3 weeks later, not immediately, not dramatically. There were no screaming fights, no thrown objects, no movie moments. There was just a gradual, awkward unwinding. Fiona stopped eating dinner with me. Aaron started working late. Boxes appeared in the hallway. A Saturday morning came when I woke up, and the house was quiet in a particular way that told me something had changed before I'd even gotten out of bed. I went to the kitchen. The coffee maker was on. They'd left it running. 2 cups in the cabinet were gone. A plant Fiona had brought in from her old apartment was gone from the windowsill. But most of their things were still there, still in boxes in the hallway. They came back that afternoon to finish. Fiona carried boxes to a rented van and didn't look at me. Aaron walked past me twice without speaking. On the 3rd pass, he stopped. He said, "I don't understand why you didn't just help us." I thought about a lot of things I could say. I thought about 14 months of rearranged pantries and missing lamps and folders on my dinner table. I thought about a man who told his mother she only uses 2 rooms of her own house. I said, "I did help you. I gave you a roof and a kitchen and 14 months to get back on your feet. That was all I had to give, baby. That was everything." He looked at me for a long moment. I don't know what he was looking for. Whatever it was, I hope someday he finds it. Then he picked up the last box and walked out. I stood at the front window and watched the van pull away. The street was quiet. There was a cardinal on the bare branch of the oak tree by the mailbox, just sitting there, not moving. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the light to start changing. Then I went back to the kitchen. I poured a cup of coffee. I plugged the blue lamp in. I'd moved it to the kitchen windowsill while they were packing, just to have it near. And I sat down at the table and I drank my coffee in my own house in the quiet of a Saturday afternoon. I thought about Robert. I thought about the way he used to sit in this same kitchen on Saturdays, reading the paper, not talking much, just present. I thought about how many Saturdays I had wished, quietly and without saying so, that I could have even one more, just one ordinary Saturday with him in this house. I couldn't have that, but I could have this. The house, the quiet, the lamp, the coffee going cold in my cup. In the months that followed, I heard pieces of what happened to Aaron and Fiona through my niece who stayed in occasional contact. Fiona did consult a bankruptcy attorney. They filed Chapter 7. The process was hard, but it ended. They found an apartment in a part of town I didn't know. Fiona got a new job. I think, and this is me reading between lines, I think they are doing better. Not great, but better. Aaron and I do not speak often. We are not estranged exactly, but we are not what we were. He sent me a card at Christmas. I sent one back. There is a door there, not quite closed. I leave it that way because he is my son, and because I am not a person who likes locked doors. But I am also not a person who will hand over her keys to someone just because they knocked. My friend Miriam came over for dinner last spring. We ate on the back deck Robert built, the one that still holds just fine after all these years, and we talked until after dark. She asked me how I was doing, really doing, and I told her the truth. I said I was good. I said I missed my son. I said I slept better than I had in 14 months. She said, "You know what your husband would have said about all this?" I said. "I do," she said. "He would have said you handled it exactly right." I think he would have. I think he would have sat across from me at this table and looked at me in that steady way he had, Not impressed exactly, just certain. Like he always knew I was capable of more than I showed. Maybe that was the thing I'd forgotten, somewhere in those 14 months of keeping quiet and keeping the peace and letting the lamp disappear into a box. I had forgotten that quiet is not the same as weak, that patience is not the same as permission. I have lived in this house for 27 years. I painted the walls. I planted the garden by the front walk. I know which floorboard creaks third from the top of the stairs, and I know where the light falls in October, and I know that the coffee tastes different in the morning when the windows are open, just a little different, enough to notice. This is my home. It has always been my home, and no one, not a folder on my dinner table, not a voice that sounds like a lease agreement, not even someone I love, gets to take that from me without a fight, even if the fight is quiet, even if no one sees it happening until it's already done.